I always thought my parents loved me and my brother equally. That's what they said, anyway. Every holiday, every birthday, they reminded us we were both important. But I guess words are easy. Actions? Not so much. It all started a few months ago, when I was getting ready for college. I'd worked hard through high school, earned good grades, even landed a small scholarship. But the rest of my tuition, I knew, would come from the college fund my parents had been saving since I was little. At least, that's what they always told me. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to hear hushed voices. My parents were sitting at the table, papers spread out, their faces tight with worry. I caught words like, "brother's business," and, "he needs this chance." My heart sank. Later that night, they sat me down. My mom gave me that soft, careful look, like she was breaking bad news gently. My dad cleared his throat and said, "Sweetheart, we know you were counting on the college fund, but your brother needs it more right now. His business can't get off the ground without some help." I just sat there, numb. My brother? The one who never finished anything? Who jumped from idea to idea, never sticking to a job for more than 6 months. I was furious but tried to stay calm. "What about me? College starts in a few weeks." "We know, honey," Mom said softly. "But you have your scholarship. You're smart, you'll figure it out." That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, feeling like the ground had shifted under me. They'd picked him over me. Without even asking. I didn't scream or fight. I just watched. Watched as they handed over everything they'd promised me. Watched as they poured their hopes into him, believing this time he'd make it work. But here's the thing they didn't know. I wasn't going to crumble. I got a part-time job, applied for more scholarships, and tightened my budget. And in the background, I started saving. Quietly, carefully, every dollar I could spare. Months passed, and while I was hustling, my brother's big idea fell apart again. My parents were crushed. They'd sunk everything into him, even dipped into their retirement savings, and now they were talking about selling the house they'd always dreamed of upgrading to. That's when an idea sparked. I checked my accounts, ran the numbers, and realized something crazy. I could afford it. The house they'd wanted so badly? I could buy it. Not for them, for me. So I made a call. Arranged a meeting. Signed the papers. The day they found out, well, let's just say they didn't see it coming. But that's not even the most shocking part. Because what happened next, after they realized I was the new owner, changed everything between us forever. When my parents first walked into that house, the look on their faces was a mix of disbelief and confusion. It was their dream home, or at least it had been. The one they'd talked about for years during family dinners and quiet evenings. The one they always said they'd buy once my brother got his business on track. But now, here I was, the one holding the keys. I still remember my mom's voice trembling when she asked, "How did you?" She couldn't finish the sentence. My dad just stood there, silent, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to find some explanation that made sense. But there was none. It wasn't just about the house. It was everything that had led to this moment. The college fund, the broken promises, the favoritism that no one wanted to admit but everyone felt. I'd loved my brother once, believed in him like everyone else. But after seeing the way my parents poured their hopes, and money, into him without ever looking back, that love started to fade. I needed them to understand something. This wasn't just about a house or money. It was about respect. About fairness. About being seen and valued for once. Looking back, I realized how long this had been brewing beneath the surface. The quiet evenings when my parents would whisper behind closed doors. The way my brother's failures were always met with endless patience, while my struggles were brushed aside as something I could handle on my own. And yet I never wanted to be the cause of more tension. I tried to keep the peace, smiled at family gatherings, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was building a plan, one they never expected. Buying the house was my way of reclaiming something that was taken from me. Something that said I wasn't invisible. But even as I signed the papers, excitement mixed with a growing fear. How would my parents react in the long run? How would my brother take it? Would this break the family apart? The days after the purchase were the hardest. My parents barely spoke to me. My mom's smiles were forced, my dad's silence heavier than ever. My brother? He avoided me altogether, as if the house was a wall built between us, not just a place to live. I couldn't help but wonder if I'd made a mistake. Had I crossed a line that couldn't be undone? Or was this finally the wake-up call they all needed? There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment that led to this. The sacrifices I'd made. The trust I'd lost. The anger I tried to hide. And yet there was still a question no one seemed ready to answer. What kind of family are we, really? Because owning that house wasn't just about property. It was about control, about power, about who gets to decide whose dreams matter. I knew this was just the beginning. The calm before a storm that would either tear us apart or force us to face some hard truths. What would happen when the past came back to haunt us? When secrets that were buried too deep started to surface? After the house became mine, the family gatherings changed. They weren't the same anymore. What used to be warm and full of laughter turned cold and awkward. My parents barely met my eyes, and my brother's silence spoke louder than any argument could. I tried to reach out, to explain why I did what I did. But every time I brought it up, it felt like I was walking on broken glass. My mom would quickly change the subject, and my dad's tired sigh told me he wasn't ready to talk. My brother? He avoided me completely, like I was a stranger who had taken something from him. Yet deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the house or money anymore. It was about pride, betrayal, and years of unspoken resentment. My brother believed he was entitled to that fund, like it was a safety net for his failures. And my parents? They felt cornered, like I'd outsmarted them or worse, betrayed their trust. Then there was Aunt Rosa. She used to be the family mediator, the one who smoothed over every disagreement. But even she was quiet now, watching from the sidelines with worried eyes. One afternoon, she pulled me aside and whispered, "You have to be careful. Families like ours don't forget things easily." Her words stuck with me. Was I wrong to stand up for myself? Was I about to lose the only family I had? Meanwhile, my brother's struggles didn't stop. Without the fund, his business ideas dried up, and frustration took over. I heard whispers from neighbors and cousins, stories about him drinking more, getting into fights, blaming everyone but himself. It hurt to hear that, but I couldn't ignore the truth. On the other hand, my own life was a whirlwind. Balancing work, college applications, and now managing a house far bigger than I ever imagined was overwhelming. But every time I walked through the rooms, I felt a strange mix of pride and loneliness. This house was a symbol of what I'd fought for, but also a reminder of everything I'd lost. The tension at home kept growing. One night, I overheard my parents arguing behind closed doors. My dad's voice was low but fierce. "She crossed a line. This isn't just about the house anymore." My heart pounded. What line? What were they really afraid of? I knew this battle wasn't over. There were secrets buried deeper than money or real estate, things that could change everything if they ever came to light. And as much as I wanted to believe things could get better, the silence between us felt heavier with every passing day. What happens when a family's foundation is shaken? Can it ever be rebuilt, or will it all come crashing down? The answers lie ahead, but right now, all I can do is brace myself for what's coming next. The silence in the house grew heavier each day, like a storm waiting to break. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, their words were sharp but carefully measured. My brother's cold shoulder was the hardest to bear. The person who should have been my closest family now acted like I was the enemy. One evening, I came home late after a long shift, exhausted but hopeful that maybe things were starting to shift. I found my parents sitting in the living room, faces tense. The moment I walked in, the room fell quiet. My mom looked at me, her eyes glossy but unreadable. My dad's jaw was tight, his hands clenched around his cup. "Sit down," my father said quietly. My heart pounded. What was this about? Was this finally the moment we'd all been avoiding? My brother appeared then, leaning against the doorframe. His eyes were darker than I remembered, clouded with anger and hurt. "We need to talk," he said, voice low but steady. It felt like the calm before the explosion. The conversation started slowly, each of us circling around the real issues like we were afraid to step on landmines. My brother's voice cracked as he accused me of stealing what was rightfully his, of using their neglect as a weapon. I tried to explain why I bought the house, how I was fighting to be seen, to have something that was promised to me. But the more we spoke, the deeper the wounds opened. Old grudges spilled out, years of favoritism, broken promises, and silent disappointments. My parents tried to mediate, but even they seemed torn between guilt and frustration. At one point, my mother's voice broke. "We never wanted this to happen. We thought we were doing what was best." But best for whom? The tension in the room was unbearable. It felt like we were all holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Suddenly, my brother slammed his fist on the table, breaking the fragile calm. "You took everything from me. Our dreams, our future." The sound echoed through the house, shaking the walls with years of anger and pain. In that moment, I realized this was bigger than the house or the money. It was about identity, about who we were as a family, and whether any of us could survive the truth. After the outburst, the room went silent again. But the quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was tense, like the calm before a final storm. Over the next days, things only got worse. My parents whispered behind closed doors, my brother's bitterness grew, and I felt more isolated than ever. I started wondering if this fight was worth it, if I'd ruined what little family I had left. And then came the unexpected knock on my door late one night. Standing there was Aunt Rosa, her face pale and serious. She pulled me inside without a word, closing the door behind her. "What I'm about to tell you," she whispered, "changes everything. But you have to promise me you won't say a word to anyone else yet." Her secret, whatever it was, held the power to shake our family to its core. As she leaned in closer, I felt the weight of what was coming, the moment when everything would be forced into the open. I didn't know if it would heal us or destroy us completely. But I knew one thing for sure, nothing would ever be the same again. Aunt Rosa's words hung in the air, heavy and urgent, as she pulled me into the dimmest corner of the living room. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but every syllable hit me like a thunderclap. "There's something your parents never told you. Something that could explain a lot." My heart raced. I wanted to ask questions, but she held up a trembling hand to stop me. "Not here. Not now. But you need to know, your parents didn't just give your college fund to your brother because they believed in him more." I stared at her, confused and wary. What else could there be? I had already felt the sting of favoritism and broken promises. Was there something darker beneath it all? She looked around nervously, then said, "There's more to your brother's story, something they've been hiding. And if you find out, it might change how you see everything." Before I could say anything, Aunt Rosa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, then said, "I have to go. But be careful. Not everyone wants this truth to come out." As she slipped out the door, I was left alone with a million questions swirling in my mind. What secret could be so powerful that my family buried it deep, even at the cost of tearing us apart? The next days were a blur. I couldn't focus on school or work. Every conversation with my parents was a careful dance, trying to catch a glimpse of what they were hiding. My brother seemed even more distant, and his anger had turned to bitterness so cold, it cut deeper than before. One afternoon, I decided to check some old family documents in the attic. It was a place I rarely visited, dusty boxes, forgotten memories stacked high. As I sifted through faded papers, a worn envelope slipped out. My name was scrawled on it in my mother's handwriting. Inside, I found letters and receipts that painted a different picture, one of sacrifice, fear, and difficult choices. There were notes about medical bills, debts I never knew about, and a letter from a lawyer mentioning a trust fund. The more I read, the clearer it became. My parents had made their decision not just based on favoritism, but because of something hidden in the past, something that involved my brother's health and future. Was that why they gave him the college fund? To protect him? Or was there something else they were afraid to tell me? The walls of our family, already fragile, felt like they were closing in. The truth I had been fighting for suddenly seemed more complicated, full of shadows I wasn't ready to face. When I confronted my parents that evening, the silence was deafening. They looked at each other, then at me, as if deciding how much to reveal. But before they could speak, my brother stormed in, eyes blazing. "Enough!" he shouted. "You think I don't know what you've been hiding? You've been lying to me all along." The tension exploded again, but this time, it was different, rawer, more painful. It wasn't just about money or the house anymore. It was about trust shattered, secrets exposed, and a family on the brink of breaking apart. I realized then that the hardest part wasn't just fighting for what I deserved. It was facing the truth behind it, and deciding if I could survive what came next. The storm was far from over. And soon, everything would come crashing down. The room felt like it was closing in on us, the air thick with years of pain and unanswered questions. My brother's eyes burned with a mix of anger and hurt, and I could see that beneath his fury was a deep sense of betrayal, not just from me, but from our parents too. For the first time, everything was out in the open, and no one knew what to say next. Finally, my father took a deep breath, his voice heavy but steady. "You all deserve to know the truth. We didn't give the college fund to your brother because we favored him. We did it because we were scared for his health." My mother nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Your brother has a condition we tried to protect him from. We didn't want to burden you with it, or ruin your chances of going to college with worries no young person should have." My brother's face softened for a moment, the anger replaced by vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "I didn't want you to know because I didn't want your pity. But it's true, I've been sick, and the money was meant to cover treatments and care." Everything suddenly made sense. The hidden tension, the secretiveness, the way my parents had acted all these years. It wasn't about favoritism at all, it was about fear, protection, and love, twisted into something painful. I felt a rush of guilt and relief. Guilt for assuming the worst, and relief that finally, the walls between us were breaking down. But then, my brother looked at me with a quiet determination I hadn't expected. "Buying the house, it was your way of fighting back, wasn't it? To prove you could do something, to take control." I nodded, unable to speak. He smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "I get it. Maybe I needed that too, to see you stand strong, even if it felt like it was against me." In that moment, something shifted. The bitterness faded, replaced by a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start over. But just as we began to breathe easier, my mother's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and paled. "It's from the hospital," she whispered. My father's face went pale. "They found something. They need to do more tests." The hope in the room wavered like a candle in the wind. The fight for our family was far from over. As we all looked at each other, unsure what the future held, I realized that sometimes, the biggest battles aren't about money or houses. They're about facing the unexpected, standing together through the unknown. And just when I thought we had reached the end of our struggles, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mother who answered. It was a voice neither of us expected, one that promised to change everything once more. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The voice on the other end was calm but firm, and I could tell it carried news that would change everything again. But this time, we were ready. Whatever came next, we wouldn't face it alone. In the days that followed, the tensions slowly began to ease. My brother's health was serious, yes, but the doctors were hopeful, and the family came together like never before. The house I bought became more than just a symbol of rebellion. It became a place where we started to rebuild trust and love. My parents apologized for the years of silence and secrecy, explaining that their fears made them hide the truth instead of facing it with us. I learned that sometimes people protect others in the wrong ways, out of love and fear, not because they don't care. My brother and I began to talk again, really talk, sharing dreams, regrets, and hopes for the future. The gap between us didn't disappear overnight, but it started to close. Looking back, I realized that the money and the house were never really about possessions or fairness. They were about being seen, understood, and valued in a family struggling to survive its own wounds. In the end, what mattered most wasn't the college fund or the house, but the chance to heal and move forward, together. Our story isn't perfect. There are still hard days, and the future is uncertain. But we chose to face it as a family, with honesty and love. And maybe that's the real lesson, that even in the darkest moments, when it feels like everything is falling apart, there's always a way to find hope and build something better. Thank you for listening to our story. If you've ever felt overlooked or misunderstood, remember, you're not alone. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from standing up for yourself, and the greatest healing comes from opening your heart to those you love.